Merhaba, hello everyone. It is so stressful to talk about anything these days about Turkey. Indeed, a lot of problems. It's not just limited to Turkey. I mean, you look at the Hong Kong, you look at the Uyghurs in China. I mean, a lot of problems. It's not good time for democracy around the world, and of course, very bad times for Turkey in terms of democracy. So, as you rightly said, I am an exiled journalist living in America for last 4 years since 2016. I was the last editor-in-chief of Zaman Daily, which was the largest circulated newspaper of Turkey. So, I mean, Turkish people understand the situation and my position and what was Zaman standing for. But for international audience who do not know much about Turkey or me, about Zaman, I say that example, I mean, to understand, to help them understanding gravity of the problem that we are talking or I am representing. So consider that Le Monde of France or New York Times of America has been shut down by their governments and its editor had to leave the country. So this is my situation. And of course, the persecution or the silencing of journalists is not limited to my newspaper. There are today more than 100 journalists behind bars. And in the last 3 years, more than 200 media outlets were shut down. And these are representing different perspectives of Turkish society. Some of them are liberal, some of them are Kurdish, some of them are Alawite, some of them are leftists. But the common thing about them is they are critical of the government of Erdogan, Erdogan's rule and his oppression and corruption. So my story is not important because of me, but because it represents an important picture of what's going on in Turkey. So we were preparing to celebrate our 30th year as a newspaper, and we were supporting Turkey to be a real democracy and join European Union, for instance, was one of very, very important editorial priorities that we had. So we were trying to bring different voices in Turkish society to speak up their minds without any limitations. And with that, in a normal day, you could see in our newspaper a journalist, a columnist from a Kurdish background, from a leftist background, from a liberal background, having their opinions on the same topic. So this was a very big richness for Turkey, for intellectual life of the country. But since 2013, when this great corruption scandal was revealed, we started to be very critical of the Erdogan government, and that created the rift, the tension or the conflict between the government and our media. And all of our, most of our columnists, reporters, staff struggled from 2013 until 2016 March. Despite all the oppression, all the pressure, all the court cases, all the threats and everything, I mean, the cancellation of the press cars was just one of the minor issues. The tax inspection, I mean, a lot of ways of pressure Erdogan tried. But I mean, I'm proud that all our staff, all our journalists working with our newspaper stood very strong and powerful until the day on March 4th, 2016, when, as a last resort, Erdogan got a decision, a court decision from a kangaroo court, indeed, not a real court, to appoint trustees to our board. And they came, indeed, they did not come in a civilized way. I mean, if you Google, anyone can Google Zaman raid Turkey, you would see that this is an occupation by a brutal police force against journalists who has nothing to do other than writing their opinions, their news, and respecting rule of law, supporting democracy, all those values. So after that terrible occupation, in 24 hours, they changed Zaman from a critical newspaper into a mouthpiece, and 4 months they continued with this new editorial policy. They fired me, of course, the first day, and then they hired another journalist to lead the newspaper. And with that, they started to have a kind of propaganda brochure for 4 months until the July 15th coup attempt. So when coup happened, the newspaper and its editorial policy was designed and defined and shaped by the government of Erdogan, but they accused our newspaper for supporting the coup, which was in their control. So with this ridiculous accusation, they raided the houses of our columnists, reporters, and they arrested whoever they found. So since then, this was the 27th of July, maybe 10 days after the coup attempt, this failed coup attempt. Even they raided my home, but I left at the end of the March that year. So they were not able to find me, but there is an arrest warrant against me. So I can't go back to Turkey. But my story, this is tragic though, but I sometimes ashamed of sharing my story, looking and remembering those who had to be facing prison terms or had to be facing torture. So this is unbelievable things are happening in last 5 years. Some of them are very well presented by all of the speakers, by Professor, by Faruk Gergeloğlu, by my colleague Arzu. So I don't like to go into all details, but this is a story of a country that was hopeful, was giving hope to be an example of Muslim democracy, and turning into an autocracy in 4 or 5 years. And now we are talking about torture, jailing not just journalists, but the women, babies, judges, even the member of Constitutional Court. So the case is so much tragic. But why? The question is why we came to that point. That's very important. In my view, there is a very important reason for this. It is a wrong diagnosis of the problem played a very crucial role. If you like to solve a problem, you need to have a healthy, a good, a correct diagnosis of the problem, first of all. So when the oppression or the drift of Turkish government from democracy started especially in 2013, with the Gezi protests in the summer of 2013, and then with the corruption scandal in December of the same year, many people in Turkey, including the observers, international observers, defined the problem as a struggle, a power struggle between the Gülen movement, the Fethullah Gülen movement or Hizmet movement, and AKP Erdogan. So that definition was translated into international platforms. So you could see the same description in New York Times, in Washington Post, in Le Monde, in Guardian, etc. So the first, that wrong definition of the problem alienated a lot of people in Turkey who were supposed to come together against the against the drift from democracy, against the authoritarian policies, against the corruption. So for a couple of years, that helped the Erdogan government to disunite people in Turkey, the Kurds, Alawites, leftist people, some liberals. They thought that this is an internal fight between two powerful forces, social forces, and this will not touch to their homes or their freedoms. So since it was a wrong description and definition, it did not stop there. So yes, the 80% or 90% of persecution or the human rights violations today in Turkey are against the Hizmet movement people. I mean, giving a figure may not be correct, but a majority of at least 1 million people were investigated. More than 300,000 people were arrested. If you calculate, a lot of them are belonging to Hizmet movement or affiliated with Fethullah Gülen's ideas. But this is not limited to that. I mean, when you go and look at the people in jail today, you could see Osman Kavala, for instance, is in jail. He's a businessman. He's a human rights advocate. But he has nothing to do with Gülen and Hizmet. And Selahattin Demirtas today, as the leader of the third biggest opposition party, in jail, but he has nothing to do with Gülen and Hizmet movement. So with that wrong description and definition, democracy unfortunately destroyed, and this is a very grave problem that unfortunately still continues. Just yesterday, I saw a news about one of the. I mean, there were more than 90 arrests. These are almost routine now. They are people arrested, doctors, the medical professionals, and they are accused of belonging or affiliated to the Hizmet movement. But one of the news portals, which claims itself as independent or liberal, whatever, but they were using the same description as this so-called infamous FETÖ, you know, the Fethullah Gülen terrorist organization, to describe those people who are doctors or who are teachers or academics, who has nothing to do with any crime, let alone attempting to violence, has nothing to do with coup, whatever. So that short-sightedness was a very important problem in my view. And the second problem is international dimension. You know, when you look at Turkey, you see that, I mean, these human rights violations and the destruction of democracy is not new, as underlined by previous speakers. So just to remember, you know, we had one-party rule since the beginning of the Republic, which lasted more than 25 years. And in those years, as today, as Ali Ünal, Mustafa Ünal, conservative religious people in jail, together with a leftist liberal Ahmet Altan, Selahattin Demirtas, in the early years of Republic, Nazım Hikmet was persecuted, and also Bediüzzaman Said Nursi was persecuted. Nazım Hikmet died in exile. Sabahattin Ali died on the way to exile. And Bediüzzaman Said Nursi, although they had different views and perspectives, spent all his life, almost, at least 35 years of his life, either in jail or in exile within a country. And even he was not left in peace in his grave when he passed away. But, saying that, of course, we should also remember that the persecution against the Armenians, against the Jews, against the Kurds. So what we are witnessing in Turkey is not new. It's not new. It is occurring, reoccurring. And this brings me to the point that I like to underline. Why? Why we are not learning? That is the biggest problem that still we are facing. So in my view, we don't know democracy. Yes, in theory we know. I studied political science. Of course, everyone knows what's democracy, but we did not digest it. So we assume democracy as a tool to bring us to power and then to control, to suppress whoever others or other point of views. And this is not limited to just Erdogan government. So this has been the case from the Union and Progress Party. At the last years of Ottoman Empire, you know, the İttihatçılar were very much freedom fighters. A lot of them were in exile. We are talking about 100 years ago. They were in exile. They were defending more rights, constitutional limitations. They were against Sultan's oppression. But when they had the chance to be in power, they made worse oppression. They destroyed a lot of rights of freedoms, a lot of human rights violations. And the Kemalists were also very progressive. They were saying that we will be bringing civilized levels of democracy to Turkey. But what they did when they were in power, for 25 years, they had one-party rule. And their ideology was the source of 5 military interventions. And even they came to, I mean, fight with everyone, not just with the Muslim or religiously oriented people, but with the leftists, with the, I mean, with the even nationalists, with a lot of people. So when Democrat Party came against Republican Party, the Kemalists, they had the same problems. At the last years, they were arresting journalists. They were investigating journalists for their critical positions. And now we are seeing the same scenario repeating. That now Islamists are coming to power, who were defending rule of law, democracy, and they were champions of press freedom. Now they destroyed Turkey even worse than the Kemalists. So today, just to give our listeners a comparative perspective, on the real coup that happened in 1980, do you remember how many academics were expelled from universities? Just 120. This is a real full-fledged coup, a successful quote-unquote coup. 120. So what is the number of academics who were expelled or jailed or killed after this unsuccessful failed coup attempt? It is over 7,000. So in those years that we had the oppression, you know, I say we never had a full-fledged democracy. But comparatively, we are living darkest times. Because, for instance, Zaman and his followers and his students were in jail, but their wives, their kids were not touched. But now the Turkish jails has more than 10,000 women, more than 700 babies. So that, I mean, yes, Turkey was not democracy ever, but today, even compared to a lot of oppressive times, it is really very dark. And looking from an international perspective, why Europe, why America is not helping Turkey? Because they did not help Turkish democracy when in 90s, Turkish Kurdish villages were destroyed. Mr. So they did not. So unfortunately, that repeats, and without learning to digest democracy and defend democracy for everyone, unfortunately, that story will continue with oppression of other people in the future.
So regarding what you told about components of democracy, we all know that freedom of expression and speech has never been enjoyed truly, fully in Turkey. But when I go to conferences, international conferences, people are asking me, what do I think about the very first step? And I always say that if the media is silenced, then the rest just can come very easily, the collapse of rule of law or the other types of oppression. What do you think about the silencing of the media in the first hand in Turkey?
Yeah, I think in every case, in any authoritarian country, they attack first the media, because this is the way to control flow of information, to shape public opinion, people's minds. That's so crucial. So because of that, all authoritarian governments or leaders had a policy to silence media, especially critical voices. And that happened in Turkish, in Erdogan's case as well. So there are two things happening at the same time. While destroying the critical voices, the critical media, they create a propagandist media. So today, as I said, 200 critical media outlets were shut down. One of them is my newspaper, the news agency, Cihan or Samanyolu or Bugün. A lot of media outlets were platforms of democracy, and they were very important platforms for opposition, but they are not existing now. We are using social media, YouTube channels, etc., as a replacement. But on the other hand, also they create a propagandist, a mouthpiece media. And that is very crucial for their continuation of power. And 95% of Turkish media is not media today. It's a propaganda booklets or a propaganda mechanism that is another obstacle in front of changing Turkey or bringing Turkey back to democracy, because that shapes people's minds. So that media calls me terrorist, 95%, and they repeat every day, and they call every of the members of that panel maybe as terrorists. And that, unfortunately, a lot of people believe in this propaganda. And so it is very crucial. Two things are so crucial for any democracy: the press freedom and the independence of judiciary. If you have any danger in two of them, you should expect that the bad days are coming. So first journalists are jailed, and then teachers, and then academics, and then business people, and then politicians. So this is how it proceeds.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Bilici, for your remarks about the freedom of expression and what happens when the media is silenced that you talked about. Thank you so much.
Thank you.